Hi guys, it's time. We're going to start our webinar. We were trying to work out the kinks. Can you, if you're in the webinar, put in the chat box, make sure you can see me. I'm Tia Mitchell, and then we have our three panelists. And we want to get started right away because we're going to keep to an hour. You should also be able to see our presentation with the title Beyond Mentoring. And I'm going to go ahead and start with introducing our panelists. I'm Tia Mitchell, and I'm the chair of the Political Journalism Task Force and the Washington reporter with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I'll be facilitating tonight, and then our panelists include Mizell Stewart. He, of course, is the Senior Director of Talent, Partnership, and News Strategy for Gannett in the USA Today Network. He also is an adjunct faculty member at the Poynter Institute, and he is the founder of his own leadership development consulting firm. We have Robin Turner, who is a copy editor at Politico. She also serves as Politico's manager of diversity programs, and she also has experience at other news organizations, including Dow Jones and Gannett. And last but not least, representing kind of the experience of reporters who are newer in their career but have used the power of mentoring to do great things is Nolan McCaskill. He's a national political reporter covering the 2020 presidential race for Politico. He recently covered Congress and authored the Huddle newsletter, and he's also an inaugural member of Politico's Journalism Institute. So that's your panel. We are ready to get started. I want to, if you're on your phone and you only see one person speaking, try swiping the screen. I think we've heard that some people are having issues seeing the webinar. If you're on your laptop, you should see us all. But if you're on your phone, it may just cycle when other people are talking as well. So let us know in the comments if you have any questions. We will be answering questions throughout the presentation. You don't have to wait till the end. We'll ask your questions at any time, and let's get started. So we can start with, I think, Mizell, take it away.
So, what is mentoring? We talk about mentoring as a relationship, and it's a relationship in which a more experienced or a more knowledgeable person helps to guide a less experienced or less knowledgeable person. But as we think about this, focus on the word relationship. As we get into the presentation, we'll talk about the different kinds of mentoring relationships, the fact that there are different, and you're in different stages in your career, or you have different needs personally or professionally, you may want to count on different folks. So first, we'd like to get a little bit of a sense of where all of you are, and we have a quick poll, and like to know a little bit more about those of you on the call and whether you are looking to get involved in mentoring. And so you should see the poll window popping up on your screen. And so select one of these responses, and we'll give it a minute so you can do that. And as you're thinking about your answer to the poll, number 3 on the poll is another thing worth considering, is that you may believe that you are early in your career, too early in your career to be a mentor, But that's not always the case. And invariably, there are far more people who are looking for mentors than people who are willing to give of their time. And so, again, as we go through the presentation, you want to think a little bit more about how you want to be engaged in mentoring, either as a peer mentor or an experienced mentor, and so forth. And so now I want to turn it over to Nolan to share a little bit about his experience in when it comes to mentorship.
Hey everyone. So not all mentors are sought. My story is about how I met one of my most influential mentors, who is a former professor of journalism at Florida A&M University. So college I went to in 2010. Originally I majored in graphic design. Ended up in her class about a year later. By the end of that course, she was highlighting me as the top writer in her class. I was surprised because I was I was a graphic design student in a class full of journalism students. I didn't really put that much effort into my writing, I thought. I did assignments at the last minute, but it still managed to impress her somehow. So she talked to me in her office after she gave me that award. We talked about the future she saw for me in journalism. Eventually, I went home for the winter break, came back, decided to change my major, give journalism a try. She escorted me to the school newspaper. She told everyone in there that I would be a copy editor. So I became a copy editor for the school newspaper. She became a big advocate for me. She would, praise me and talk to all the professors about me, spread a good word. She was there when I needed any recommendations for anything. She's the one who emailed me about the opportunity to go to Politico's first year journalism institute. When it came to awards, she was always someone who was happy to, help me get to what I needed to get to. Scholarship was always there as well. So I wasn't never really looking to get into journalism. I was never looking for a mentor, but she saw something in me early, and she, continued to, hone in on me and try to manifest the vision she saw for me. She had told me what she saw in me early on, and continued to be an advocate, continued to push me. Years later, I've been at Politico for more than 5 years now. I've been able to cover the White House. I'm now covering the 2020 presidential campaign. Spent a year covering Congress and doing the morning newsletter. Initially came to Politico, 2 weeks after graduating college. Been able to do a lot of things. None of that would be possible if it wasn't for her influence.
And then when it comes to being found having essentially somebody discover your potential, Robin, you've shared a little bit about what it means to be in a position to be mentored. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Wow, that's really, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me all right. I was having some little volume issues earlier, but thank you for including me on this panel. First of all, it's an honor to be here and to share with all of you. And that's a very good question you raised about being found. It's really multiple factors with that. I think that when you are productive and have some sense of direction and know what your goals are, this helps people to find you, to connect with you based on their own interests, their own skills, their own positions. If they know people who they can connect you with, all of these things come to bear when they see what drives you. What is your passion? What is your work ethic? What is it that you are trying to accomplish? I hope that answers part of that question, Ms. L. If I should continue, let me know.
Absolutely. And so, Robin, you want to continue on what it takes to create a successful relationship?
Absolutely. So when we're talking about successful mentoring, right, we're wanting to make sure that we have common goals, the mentor and the mentee, which goes back to the point we just made about being clear on what those goals are. And there are some very basic tips that we can give to first set a good foundation. Tips like being respectful of your mentor and mentee's time, paying attention when, you know, you're sharing in these conversations. Not demanding too much too soon. You don't want to dump everything on your first meeting or on any single meeting, but you want to mine those precious moments to have at least a good takeaway, right? And then follow through on the tasks. Some of these are Mazelle's own tips, and I would add to that list, if I could, to know your mentor. See, you have to take time to understand what it is you hope to gain out of these relationships. And we talked about the traditional model at the top of this webinar, but there are other types of mentor relationships too. And you have to know, as the mentee, what type of relationship it is. Is it a peer-to-peer mentor relationship? If that's the case, you're going to get a different value set out of that than you will with your more senior mentor model. But let's assume we're sticking with that traditional model, and in that, know that mentor's busy time. Know when it's best to reach him or her. And if they work by daily deadlines in journalism or have a crunch time during the day, try to avoid those busy times when you reach out. How does your mentor prefer to communicate? Those are things that you can establish up front. And this will also help it to be a successful model. If it's an informal relationship, try to come to agreement at the beginning of the mentoring relationship as to how long it will last. For example, if you set a term and say, would it be all right for the next 6 months if I just kind of walk with you and learn from you? I notice that you have expertise in ABC area and I could learn from that. If you're very clear and set some very specific boundaries, that helps both of you, so that at the end of that relationship or the end of that term, you can decide to continue or not if the goals are achieved. I think we go to the next slide. So now when we look at advice for the responsibilities of successful mentors, I like that acronym, Mazelle. Do what you say you will do. You know, keep your promises. And really that can go on both sides because trust is the basis of every successful relationship. We know that. So that being said, you know, try to have a game plan, try to set up your action plans, and know what your expectations are of one another. I would say mentors who are the best mentors don't jump in and make the decisions for the mentee. What we should do in a good relationship is to discover together, to learn from one another. My mentee might have a thought I never considered, but combine that with my experience, I might be able to offer the mentee different paths or resources or ways to accomplish that goal. So the communication should be two-way. We should be respectful of one another. I should not make decisions for my mentee, but having said that, the mentee has a responsibility in this as well. I think that might be the next slide. So if the mentee does what I call a 360, right? They're going to take the notes, they're going to be specific about their goals, they're going to understand. If they need to, they can repeat back to the mentor what they believe they heard, and then they're going to act on those goals, right? But then they're also going to come back to do two things. One is to write the thank you letters, or notes, or emails, just to express appreciation. People's time truly is valuable. And then two, to let that person know of the outcome. What are the measures? What successes or mistakes or failures have you had? We learn from both, and your mentor will help guide you in assessing both. What does it look like in practice? Here's an example, and I'll be quick. If a mentee reviews her goals, she should make sure her mentor knows, right, what those goals are. Likewise, the mentor should be able to help set up a system, not set the system up for the mentee, but to help the mentee set up a system, however basic that is. It doesn't have to be complicated, on how to achieve those. That way, the mentee continues to have responsibility. You as a mentee will want to have ownership of your own goals and your own plan, and then let others support you in it.
I want to tell a story that might help those who are looking for mentors and to see how it can unfold in an actual example. A couple of years ago, I purchased a ticket to the NABJ Region 3 conference in Atlanta, and then at the last minute, I was going to be out of town and I couldn't go. And I put on social media that I was going to donate my ticket to a student. That's all I said. I said, hey, Twitter, if you know a student who wants to attend, tell them to connect with me on Twitter.
That's good.
And a student, the Georgia State University chapter, put it on their Twitter, and the president of that chapter, networking, got in touch with a student, and her name is Kelsey, and Kelsey said, I'll take the ticket. I had not met Kelsey. We kind of DM'd, got with NABJ, transferred the registration, and I in my mind, that was that. But Kelsey had the initiative that a couple of weeks later, she asked me to lunch. And she said she just wanted to thank me for giving her the ticket. But at the lunch, she picked my brain. We talked about her career goals. We talked about how school was going. We talked about the experience she was getting and where she wanted to go. And then Kelsey asked, could she shadow me in the newsroom? The next thing I know, she's shadowing me in the newsroom. She's meeting people, and Kelsey kept in touch. That was her junior year. She graduated in the spring. She's now a producer of a morning show at a TV station in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And we just had our mentor-mentee check-in this past week. And it was very organic, very informal. We would go to lunch every now and then. We would talk, text. If she needed something, I think I even helped her with the letter of recommendation once, but it was very organic. It did not start out as a heavy lift. And I think that it goes to show you that it doesn't have to be a formal, will you mentor me? It could just really be lunch or saying thank you or asking to shadow someone, and then let it go from there.
That's good. Sometimes in seeking out those types of opportunities, being found means in an organic sense, as you just pointed to, Tia. If it's not at a conference, it could be in a committee meeting or in a joint project or in a professional organization. So there are different ways to do that. I'm sorry, I don't hear.
And so it's important when you're thinking about trying to get a mentor to be very focused on what you are looking for. You've got to think about your goals, your personal situation, and your development needs in terms of finding somebody who is going to help you move forward. And the reason behind that is twofold. One is that one person may not provide you with what you need. Oftentimes people will get in touch with me and say, Mizell, would you be my mentor? And I say, well, I'm happy to help you, but what do you need? Because if you need something that I can't provide, I might not be the best person for you. And the way that workplaces are these days, the way that career paths in journalism are very different than what they used to be, it's very unlikely that a single person can help you get to where you need to go. You often need to think about multiple people. And so here's one way to look at this. And there are 4 questions that you can ask to try to identify the right people. I've had really great success if I set my sights on a particular job, finding somebody who already has that job and leaning on them to talk to me about how they got prepared, what put them in that position. And that's not necessarily a senior executive. You know, it may be one of your colleagues who's already there. Another question is, who can help you get there? That can be a different kind of person, because maybe this person who has the job that you want is not necessarily the person who's making the decisions. And so thinking about who can help you get there. Sometimes you go into a new organization or a different organization and you need somebody on the inside who can give you the straight scoop about what's going on. But then you might be thinking about moving on from your current organization. So who can help you broaden your network? And so these are literally 4 kinds of people you want to be thinking about. And I call the person who has the role that you want next a trailblazer. And, you know, here's somebody who's navigated that journey, and you're looking for guidance, you're looking for advice on how you get there. But in the workplace, you know, somebody has to be that person to raise your name when an opportunity comes up. So oftentimes the person who can help you get there in the workplace is a sponsor, you know. And so in Politico, for example, you know, Robin, because she is a more senior person within the organization, could very well be a sponsor for Nolan. So when an opportunity comes up where they're talking about, you know, putting somebody on a particular story that's going to stretch his abilities, Robin, as a sponsor, would be in a position to say, have you thought about Nolan? A sponsor is somebody who talks about you when you're not in the room.
That's right.
And so you've got to build those kinds of relationships. Similarly, within the organization, you know, if you go into a new organization and you really don't know how things get done, the kind of mentor that helps in that situation, I call a navigator. You know, you're looking for the person who is wired, the person who's in the know, the person who's trusted and who people will go to for advice. But then when you're thinking about outside your organization, you want to talk to that person who knows a lot of people. And so those are the people I call connectors. And so all of these people play different roles, and at different times in your career or in different situations, you may want to rely on one of these 4 kinds of people. Anyone have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to interject that in finding those 4 different people, it may be useful to literally do some brainstorming, especially if you're in a position where, you know, finding a mentor is particularly important at this juncture of your career. You're looking for a change, you're unhappy at work, or you're running into some issues at work and you know you need someone to help you navigate the waters, which has happened to me before. And, you know, sometimes it's getting out a piece of paper and brainstorming these 4 roles. Or it might not be as formal, but it's good to think about those roles and think about the different people that can help fill those different roles.
So what you're really speaking to about here is knowing your culture and the landscape. And I think it goes back to your point, Mizell, about learning the company or the organization, how it works.
Absolutely. And there are even additional kinds of mentors. Nolan, can you reflect a little bit on how, you know, mentors who occupy these different kinds of roles have helped you?
Sure. I would consider Dr. White, the person I mentioned earlier, to be a personal mentor. At one point, she was a professor, but even though, you know, I'm no longer a student, she's still someone who's active in my career. We're constantly checking in with each other and letting her know what's going on with me, and she's letting me know what's going on with her. When internship opportunities at Politico come up, I'm communicating with her to see what kind of students she has on her radar. Robin's constantly urging me to, go back to FAMU and find out who's, the next person who could come out of
Absolutely.
Politico as well. I'm a big fan of peer mentors. First, I want to credit Robin for being a professional mentor herself. She's someone who's a navigator and connector for me and a sponsor for me in the newsroom. She's the one who formally nominated me to be the vice chair of the NABJ political task force. So it was great to have her as an ally in the newsroom. I want to tell a quick story about one of my peer mentees. I'm oftentimes asked, what's my greatest accomplishment? I usually think about, I've been to the White House, I've gotten to fly on Air Force One. I remember I was there on a rainy day when President Trump fired Rights Previous. I got to watch Obama speak. I got to watch him deliver his last address at the Hampton for the White House Correspondents' Dinner. But when I'm asked this question, I often turn to the fact that I was able to successfully nominate one of my mentees to become NABJ Student Journalist of the Year. And that was something that was literally years in the making. I met her when I was in school. She's one of those students that you kind of heard about her before you saw her. All the professors and students loved her. She was dedicated to her craft. She was talented. She was eager to learn and work. So my final semester, I kind of took her under my wing when I was a news producer, challenged her to be in AP for me and help me produce my shows on Fridays. Even though I graduated, we kept that relationship going. We were communicating about internships and different opportunities she was interested in. When I would see opportunities, I would flag them to her and always let her know that I'm happy to look over a resume, look over your application, look over a cover letter, talk to you about whether you're nervous about being in this position, who else should you reach out to about it. And so within a year span, her resume included, let me pull up what I had. She was an ONA HBCU Digital Media Fellow. She was an RTDNA Michelle Clark Fellow. She had interned twice at CBS News over 2 summers. She had attended an IRE conference on a Knight Scholarship. She had made the Roots Top 25 Young Futurist list, and she also did a 15-minute documentary. So when it came time to nominate someone for NABJ's Student Journalist of the Year, it was easy to nominate her because I knew so much about her personally and professionally. I was involved in all of the different accolades she was starting to gather throughout that past year. And it was an honor to watch her receive her award in Washington, D.C., I think back in 2016. So that's just, one example of how you don't always need to reach out to someone who's older. Sometimes it's easier to reach out to someone who's your age, who may be in school with you, who may be a coworker. Because oftentimes people who are in the same age gap or age range, they're often experiencing the same things. We both, young journalists, have questions about what is the first salary I should ask for? What if I'm asking for too much? When is it appropriate for me to speak up in the newsroom? For women, oftentimes it's, what do you do with your natural hair if you're going to be in broadcast? And when you look to peer mentors, those are a lot of people who are easy to reach out to because they're accessible. You don't revere them as much as you would someone who's a major reporter at the New York Times or something. You feel comfortable reaching out to them, and they're usually happy to give you guidance. So I'm a big advocate of peer mentoring for that reason.
So guys, we have a question from the audience. It's a little bit, it kind of goes here as when we're talking about finding the right fit for you. And the question is, have you ever mentored someone to realize that mentee may not be ready for the career they want? And how do you help ensure they're realistic about not yet being ready for perhaps the position or where they aspire, they're not ready in that moment? How do you keep it real?
A lot of that is about creating that trusting relationship. And a lot of times it's hard to accomplish this in a drive-by kind of conversation because people tend to get defensive when they're getting feedback that they're not quite ready. It's easy to be defensive because that's not what you want to hear. If you're an aspiring reporter or producer or assigning editor, and you want to get to the next level, and somebody's giving you feedback that you're not quite ready, that's not pleasant news to hear. Mm-hmm. And so building that relationship I think is very important. And in those kinds of situations, if a mentor is in a position to help provide the right experiences, what's worked for me has been dissecting where this person is falling short, and designing experiences and recommending experiences to help fill in those skill gaps. And in some cases, it's even, take this class because, you really need to get experienced in doing spreadsheets and analyzing data if you want to be an investigative reporter. And so, maybe you take a class in Excel. Maybe you shadow another reporter when they're going out on the classic confrontational interview in an investigation. But it's all about, how do you help that person stay on that path? I'm not a believer in telling people that they will never be ready for something. That's the number one way to kill their spirit. At the same time, what I will say is, here are some things that you should consider doing in order to be prepared for to get to this next level. Mm-hmm. And Robin, can you talk a little bit more about how that relationship should work and what it means to really bring out the best in both sides of the relationship?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Obviously this will depend on individuals, but I think that when you have that common vision and understanding of expectations, what is it you're trying to achieve in your mentoring relationship, that puts you in good position, right, to grow, both the mentor and the mentee. The mentor, it's interesting, when you have a good match and common goals or expectations, the mentor knows, and I heard you say this earlier, Mizell, how can I help you? What is it that you need from me? And am I able to do that? Am I in a position to help you with your goal? And if we have a good match there, this begins to challenge me as the mentor in a good way. What that does is I learn new ways to pull out, and help a person to discover and get to their next step, whether that's by pointing them to resources or opening a door for them, or raising their name in a meeting, or finding a new opportunity, helping them network. Those are all things that sharpen my skills, because the mentee is going to have questions along the way. And a good mentee is going to follow up on those steps and come back with more discussion, more points of discussion, more ideas, more questions. Will challenge me in my thinking. So this is what I mean when I say that we both follow up and do our due diligence, right? And this helps us both to grow. It's a very organic situation. Your creativity and your skills and your thoughts and your talents are going to, bring out something in me. And my strengths won't be the same as yours, but hopefully we'll bring out something in you. Together, we both grow individually as well as a partnership. And it doesn't have to be formal. I like what you said, Tia, about organic relationships. It's not just a transactional thing. When it becomes only a transactional basis for the mentorship, I think you lose some of the trust and comfort of being who you really are. I think that when you're comfortable to share as a mentor both your accomplishments and your mistakes, and what you learned from that, that can help the other person to know, well, I can move forward even though I may have had a mistake, and build some hope in that situation. I thought that last question was very interesting too, because the mentor is not necessarily the supervisor. So you have to be careful not to try to assess the person's work, but getting back to the point Maisel just made, help them explore their skills and ways to improve. And we all can do that and not feel threatened or defensive about, about it.
Okay, guys.
Okay.
I think we're moving on to our next slide, which is another check-in. So we want this to be interactive. We're going to load our next poll. And that poll is about, for those who are looking for mentors, which per our previous poll, a lot of people are, what are the barriers? You know, what often keeps you from finding the right mentor? So you should see the poll on your screen. Pick one of the answers. It gives you a few seconds, and we'll get the results in a minute. It didn't take too long last time. I think the poll's still up for a little bit longer, but yeah, we can move on to the next slide.
Okay, so the next slide is about finding the right mentor. When it comes to seeking a mentor, you want to find somebody who will take a personal interest in you. We've talked a lot about organic relationships. As a student and young journalist, oftentimes, as I've gone through different journalism programs, people have attempted to assign mentors, which is a great effort to connect someone with experience to someone that you may overlap with as far as, what your interests are. But oftentimes the most successful relationships have been things that have happened organically. Somebody reaches out to me on Twitter, they ask a question, I'm happy to answer. They get my phone number, we talk for maybe a half hour about what they want to do. They start to follow up, let me know about internships they're applying to. Let them know I'm happy to look over their resume. A year passes, and I consider them one of my mentees. There's someone, when I hear about different opportunities throughout the industry, or specifically at Politico, they're top of mind. I'm letting them know, hey, you should apply for this. I know you've been working on this and that for the past year. I think you'd be a good fit for that. You also want to look at the example they set. When I was in college, a lot of people kind of leaned toward me as a mentor just because I was the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. I was very accessible. I became one of the few news producers that the school had as well. But also really surrounded myself with like-minded people who kind of became my mentees. They never really asked me to be their mentor. I didn't ask to be their mentor. Just worked so hard together. We spent a lot of time together that's just sort of the relationship that we developed organically. They trusted me. They saw my work ethic. They admired some of the things I was able to do. They wanted to do it as well, and I was happy to help them reach those goals. So finding someone who sets a good example is a very good thing to look for in a mentee. It's also great to ask your peers for suggestions and recommendations, and really know who the person is by looking up their background. One of the best pieces of advice I've gotten when people ask, how do you get into political journalism? I don't remember who said this, but someone's advice was to look up a political journalist, go to their website, dig up their resume, see where they started, see how they got to where they were, what were the different positions. So really knowing somebody's background is great. If you do reach out to that person that you looked up, you really have things that you can spark a conversation with. Hey, I noticed that you started out in a local paper like I did right now. 6 years later, you were at this big national organization. Now you're covering this and that. What's your advice for someone like me who's, starting from a similar place like you? That's just one easy way to get into a conversation with someone, even if it's like a cold email or a cold call, something like that. It's just really easy to connect with the person if you really know their background and put in the effort to do that. And the next slide, I believe, is on making and sustaining a match. Mentorships are definitely a two-way street. I've had people email me like, hey, I've heard so much about you from in school from my professors. Could you be my mentor? Oftentimes, I'm like, that's not really how it works. You know, mentorships for me are something that happen organically. I don't really just, agree. It's not a contract. I can't sign and say I'll be your mentor for this period. I've tried to mentor people. Sometimes it doesn't work out. I remember like when the question was posed, I didn't really have the experience of telling someone, they're not ready for the career they want, but I can remember a time when trying to help someone become a better writer. So I created this, fake scenario with different facts that was tied to a real event. I put in all this effort to give this person this information. I was going to have this person write a story based off the information. Some of it would involve some fact checking because it was tied to a real event. I put in all this work. I sent her this thing. It was like, hey, get this back to me when you can. A couple of days passed, a week passed, a month passed. I never got anything back. So as a potential mentor, I felt slighted because I put in all this effort to try to help you become better at something that you want to be better at. And then, when it came to it, you didn't want to put up your end. So it's important to find a match, but you also have to be able to sustain it. I would advise you when you're reaching out to someone, don't always only follow up when you need something. It can be draining as someone who's dealt with that. I'm always happy to help people, but I do have a job that I'm responsible for every day. I get a bunch of emails throughout the day and text messages. I'm working on this and that, trying to ignore people every once in a while to get some free time. But it is important to just reach out and say, hey, I read your story. Just wanted to say I thought it was very well done. I hope to write like that one day. Not necessarily saying, hey, I'm going to apply for this internship. I'd love some help if you can. That's something that goes a long way. It builds a lot of goodwill. People are happy to help you. They look forward to your calls when they know it's not always a, hey, can you help me with this? Or, hey, can you do that? But sometimes it's just, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. I want to check in on you and let you know what I've been working on. I'm really proud of this assignment I've been doing. I'm really proud of this story I just wrote for my class. I'd love you to take a look at it one day. We don't have to talk about it now. I'm just calling to check in. It's also important to have specific objectives in mind. If you want to mentor, why? You need to let that person know what the role is. I agreed to be a mentor for one of the NABJ regions. I don't remember the number specifically. I think it's the third region. But one of the early conversations I was having with the student is, what exactly do you hope to get out of this? Because it is an election year. I'm covering the Democratic primary. So I think it's important to kind of set the terms from the beginnings to make sure that I can fully commit and give this student some of the things he's looking for, and that he's, getting out as much as he can from our relationship as a mentor and mentee. Like it says, take charge of the calendar. If you do want to meet with someone, try to set up time for coffee, but understand that sometimes, people are busy. So don't really try to set the terms, but, take the initiative to say, hey, I'd love to get for coffee sometime this month if you're free. Don't be afraid to follow up, but don't, pester them too much because, again, we're all working people. We do have busy things. Some people are married, they have children, they've got jobs. They want to take advantage of the little free time we do get. That also goes to being sensitive to time and resource pressures. And it's also good to just meet face-to-face every once in a while. It's just a lot of value you get that you don't get over the phone. People are really tuned into you when you're sitting directly in front of them versus maybe trying to watch the latest football game while you're talking on the phone, kind of waiting for the call to end. So there's really a lot of value you get when you're sitting in someone's face.
Very good. Can we put up the results of the second poll? Okay, those were the results for question number one, and most everybody on the call is looking for a mentor, but are also folks who serve in both roles, which is fantastic. And then the main barrier that you're encountering is that people you would like to mentor you are too busy. And then the second is afraid to ask for help, and third is don't know anyone to ask. And that's not uncommon. A lot of times what will happen is when you're thinking about mentors, you are doing your best to shoot for the moon. You're trying to get the best potential person to serve as a mentor. And what they say is, if you want something done, ask a busy person. And people do get busy. They do get occupied. And so thinking about the different kinds of people, you might be able to find someone who may not be Yamiche Alcindor, but who has the ability and who has the time and can help you get to the next level. So,
I was just going to say, in some of this, a couple of people, click the "I'm too afraid" box. Mm-hmm. And that's one of those journalism things. Boldness is something that's not only going to help you get a mentor, but it's going to help you be a better journalist. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't come as naturally for some as it does for others. So, I'm not trying to downplay how tough it is sometimes to step outside your comfort zone and approach a stranger, or to seek out someone that you might not know as well for professional advice. But that boldness will get you far. And it's a muscle that the more you exercise, the better you'll get at it. And it's a muscle that, again, won't only help you with the mentoring part, but it really will help you with your journalism career. Mm-hmm. The worst someone can say is no, and usually they'll do it in a very nice way. And so, there's nothing wrong with making the ask. And again, hopefully today we've given you some tools so that you make the ask in a way that can be manageable for even a busy person. Don't necessarily ask, like Nolan said, can you sign the contract to be my mentor for the next 5 years? Right. Ask them to shadow, ask them to read over and give you feedback on something you're proud of. Ask them to coffee, go up to them after the NABJ meeting and just strike a conversation for a few minutes. So there are different levels to it that I was going to say. And then the thing about, hopefully, and we'll share it a little bit later, some tools to brainstorm about, some people said they couldn't find the right person or didn't know anyone. So hopefully we'll help you brainstorm to think of some other people to contact. And we do have a question, panelists. Are you ready? This question is, how do you tell your mentor that you aren't feeling the love? You're not feeling like the mentee isn't feeling like the mentor is really giving them much. That it's not helping. What should that mentee do in that situation? I was going to say sometimes. Go ahead, Mazel.
Go ahead, Tia. I was going to say, you want to think about it this way. If the mentor is not helping you, the first thing you have to ask is, do you have the right mentor? Because, if you're not getting actionable advice, one of several things might be happening. One could be that this is not a person who really understands what you're trying to accomplish, or is in a position to be a sounding board. A lot of times, you'll go to somebody who is a very senior person. But I'm going to tell you something about being a senior person. It's been 25 years since I've been a reporter. So if you're coming to ask me about, what it means to be, in the thick of news gathering, my advice is going to be 25 years old. So, it's an example of, there may not be the right person to help you if what you're asking is not necessarily this, person's recent expertise. And that's just one example. I tend not to favor telling somebody you have asked to volunteer of their time and to invest in you that they suck at it. It has the potential to really backfire on you.
It sure does.
And so, you really, in that case, if you're not getting what you need, you can be very gracious about it and say, I have really appreciated the advice and counsel that you have given me, and I'll value that, and would appreciate the opportunity to stay in touch and move on.
That's good. And, I was just going to say something similarly to that, is that look for ways to transition it into a positive. Relationships change, first of all, whether you're outgrowing the relationship or whether it was not a good fit to begin with. But remember how small our industry is. And if nothing else, look at this as a way of expanding your network, your professional network. It doesn't, if it wasn't the perfect match as far as a mentoring relationship, it could be a good professional just to have in your network, just to chat with a story. What do they think about a story? And you can transition and change or pivot, is what I'm saying. Maybe it won't be regular meetups or anything, but from time to time, you might want to check in. You never know who can help you down the road. So I'm not saying to not be genuine. I'm just saying, as was repeated, before, be gracious.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've got about 5 minutes left, and wanted to have one more thought from Robin before we wrap up with a couple more of your questions.
Wow, don't play the victim. We had some conversations about this, and there are a lot of ways to look at this, but I think the bottom line for me was knowing the difference in being teachable and being overly dependent. And you don't want to lean so hard that you're looking for someone else to do your work and make your decisions for you, but you want to get the most value out of this relationship by learning. And so I look at it as a lifelong learner that I am. I'm always looking for ways to learn. So you're not passive in this relationship. Likewise, you're not bringing to the relationship all of your problems, the obstacles that you might meet on the workplace, and this happened to me, that happened. Don't dump on your mentor. Everyone's busy. Try to be very specific when you come into your conversations and bring value out of it. Bring it positive. If you have had an experience that was not entirely positive, try to find tools and actionable ways to improve upon that area or learn from that. And I think that's the way I would use the mentor in those relationships, and not just be taking a complaint. For one thing, people cannot really help you if it's only a complaint. There's no point of entry to that conversation. But if you come to me and you're asking for ideas on how you could have done better in this situation, or what could I have done to position myself, in a more opportune way, or, what resources could I use to keep this from happening again, then I can help. But
absolutely,
I'll leave myself take it from
Robin,
there.
Robin, I think you framed that really nicely. It's okay to come at a problem in the workplace and talk it through. The conversations that I appreciate having with people is where people will reflect on what happened and say, hey, this happened, and I am very interested in, let me walk you through kind of what happened and how I reacted, and I would be interested in your thoughts on how I might be able to handle a situation like that better in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And we know it's right almost 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we did want to share before we leave, we talked about, being able to brainstorm and come up with not only what you're looking for in a mentor, but help find, you know, those people who can fit those roles.
Mhm.
And so in the comments, I'm putting in a link to this worksheet we found. It's something that Harvard uses with its students in its career program, but it really is applicable in any situation. And if you download that worksheet, it talks about kind of figuring out your goals, then figuring out who can help you reach your goals. Because remember, going back to our presentation, it's not just one person. It can be many people to fit different roles as a mentor as you continue to progress in your career. So try that worksheet out for the brainstorming. Someone did ask, well, the webinar is being recorded, and NABJ will let us know how to replay it. I think it goes on the NABJ website as a resource. And so you can play it back later and get all this information. And let's see what time. And NABJ says it will also send you some information as a follow-up. It's 8 o'clock, so this is the end of our hour. We want to say thank you to all of our participants. And of course, thank you, Mazel, Nolan, Robin, for being awesome panelists.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for joining the NABJ Political Journalism Task Force for our very first webinar. Now go get you some good mentoring.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.